Hello, welcome to the Shelly Show. I'm Shailendra, and you're watching this simulcast live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I hope you and your family is safe. For you to view this episode and other sessions that run on emerging technologies live, I would request you to follow me so you can be alerted when a live session is on. This gives you an opportunity to ask questions directly to our guests. So please press the follow button if you're watching on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're watching me on YouTube, then please hit the subscribe button and also press the bell icon so that you are sent a notification. So for maximum reach of the episode, please like and share this episode, whichever platform you're watching on, so that more and more people learn from the episode. There's lots of good things that come out of these episodes. This is episode number 3. Okay, artificial intelligence, AI as we call it. And the related technologies are increasingly prevalent in business and society and are beginning to be applied to healthcare as well. So today we'll talk about AI and healthcare and see how that works with the startups. These technologies have the potential to transform many aspects of patient care as well as administrative processes within providers, payers, and pharmaceutical organizations. According to a research, the AI in healthcare market is expected to grow to $36 billion by 2025. So a lot of money is being pumped into the industry. There are already a number of research studies suggesting that AI can perform as well as or better than humans at key healthcare tasks such as diagnosing diseases, etc. Today, algorithms are already outperforming radiologists at spotting malignant tumors. I'm just trying to get my English right here, and guiding researchers in how to construct cohorts for costly clinical trials. So welcome to the 3rd episode of the Artificial Intelligence Startup Insight series. In this series, we discuss both about artificial intelligence and how startups are leading in this space. Today we're joined by, again, Marc Teerlink, who doesn't need any introduction, but just for people who are joining it for the first time, Marc is the SAP's Global Vice President for Intelligent Enterprise Solutions and Artificial Intelligence. Marc is very active in the startup community as an angel investor, mentor, and as a board member, which makes him much more relevant, and his thoughts are very important to this discussion. So without any further ado, let me bring Marc to the show. Hi, Marc. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everybody. How are you doing, Shelley?
Very good. I know I'm bringing you out of your holidays, in and out. So thank you for joining us, even if you are on holidays these days.
It's my pleasure. I mean, as they say, the show must go on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for taking time out from your holiday time. Okay, Marc, the complexity and the rise of data in healthcare means that artificial intelligence will increasingly be applied within this field. We all know that. Several types of AI are already being employed by payers and providers and life science companies. What categories of applications do you see AI driving the healthcare business? And I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's really good. I mean, as you know, this is one of my most favorite topics that technology can be used to, actually to improve both our health, but also the quality of work for the professionals that work in healthcare. And then, again, I want to do a shout out for everybody who's working in healthcare at this moment, because I cannot imagine of a time that the pressure on each of you have been so tremendously as at this moment. Kudos again. Going to healthcare, first we have to look at one part, right? What does AI do in general and also in healthcare? Artificial intelligence at this moment isn't a fully end-to-end automated process that takes over a job. It's not a online AI doctor that you have a conversation with, and the AI doctor knows exactly what you want. But what AI does, it takes one task, which is mostly a repetitive, mind-numbing, driving you boringly nuts task, which is in healthcare really important. So we see different kind of processes. We see workflow, which is mostly the automation of a process. How do I make sure that the handovers, like, these moments, especially in US hospitals, when you go to a hospital and you are the EMR. It's not that the EMR is in the system. No, every specialist that you go to, you stand for a counter 15, 20 minutes before your appointment, and you have to fill in exactly the form. Which medicines do you use? What allergies do you have? Right? There's a risk continuously, and the lesser aware a patient is, for whatever reason, age, education, anxiety at that moment, there's a risk that we forget that one important little piece there. Mm-hmm. So if you take the first part of it, can you already do a workflow and a handover that the output of one process is the input of the next? This is also known as robotic process automation. But RPA, robotic process automation, mostly only did rule-based until recently. If we add intelligence to that process, hey, if you say this, you also mean that, right? The best example is still, you go to a hotel and there's like 50 questions that are all leading to the same answer. If you want to use the Wi-Fi or the internet at the hotel, they can say, what is the password? How do I connect mobile phone? What's the best way to go to the internet? How do I connect to my room? All these. Now imagine that's just one thing, right? A hotel, and you need, because we can live longer without water than without Wi-Fi, but you need to come on the internet. Now, if you go to a hospital, right, multiple processes will deal with the interpretation of you as a patient, the words, what they mean to you, the interpretation of the receptionist, the interpretation of the nurse practitioner or the assistant, and the interpretation of the doctor and his or her training and background. And even within two hospitals, you can have different standards in EMR, and even in the same country or in the same state, you could have different hospitals with different abbreviations for what a right leg, a left leg, and this kind of procedure is. Like, each practice has their own lingo. Now, as long as you lived in that bubble, that will be okay. But the moment you start handing over files and information, so we're not even talking about incredible, super intelligent stuff. We're talking about heavy lifting. So the first that you see is workflow. The second what you see are matching processes. Right? It's really hard for a human eye to see in a melatonin when you have birthmarks or you have spots coming on, right? The size of the mole and how it's growing. But if you have AI continuously looking like the last 50 pictures and directly the placement, etc., it aids the radiologist. When you're an orthopedic surgeon, right, and you go to 5 pictures the last 12 months of your spine and your L4, your L5, it will directly to the last millimeter spot the differences in posture, etc., etc. So all it does in those matching processes, it matches two things with each other. Mostly these are two images or two things of the same point. It can be a little bit more advanced. You combine workflow and matching. And one of the first cases I had the privilege to work with was literally clinical trial matching. Now, if you're in the US with a healthcare system like the US, 20% of people that are diagnosed with cancer are eligible for clinical trial. Less than 5% get matched. Less than 5% get matched. Because it takes 160 to 180 hours for a medical professional, a physician and his staff or her staff, to go to all the details. What's the quality of environment where you live? What's the water, the air, etc.? Do you live in an apartment? Do you need to take the stairs? Do you have somebody who can drive you? Because that's important if we look to clinical trials that are more than so many minutes away from your home or so many hours. Can you emotionally deal with losing your hair? And those are just the questionnaire part that you and I normally fill in. Then you get all the medical treatments and the pros and cons. So the moment you crunch those 160, 180 hours to nanoseconds, and you give them back to a physician, what you actually do at that moment is you take one repetitive, intensive, but also for our human brain numbing task, where we can make mistakes, and say, I am your little sidekick. And that's mostly what AI does. So it does a workflow, it does matching. Now, the Valhalla is still the predictive cases, right? I mean, in industry, it's always the predictive maintenance. Now, think about your body. What is the predictive maintenance of your body, right? If you do this, and you take these medicines, and Suddenly you come in, you just had a food poisoning. What is the best approach for you to take? Should we drop one of your medicines or not? If you have a patient who is on, who's psychologically more needing medicines, right? And that person has side effects, but that person is geriatric. The person is old, in their 80s. What is better? To take the anxiety drugs off and give somebody 5 years quality better of life in their body, but make them totally anxiety for 5 years, or maybe let somebody live for 3-4 years, but with an anxiety drug with the risk of a side effect like a heart attack. That is something, Shelley, AI can't do. AI can show to a medical professional, this is what I predict the impact is, this is what I predict the impact is. And the good thing is, medical professionals are trained like that. They are trained in the process of triage. They continuously go to a decision tree of pros and cons, and they continuously have learned to eliminate everything else that doesn't make sense to end up to the most obvious, Occam's razor, obvious conclusion. So, summarizing to your question, what do we see mostly, especially in healthcare? We see workload and workflow offloading. We see matching like clinical trial or medicines or triage or pictures, images. And we see the combination of both trying to offload the heavy lifting for doctors and giving them more time to think about that predictive decision that they have to take. So in summary, it's AI. It's all about the AI use case. Now, one of my things that I always drive everybody nuts to is the training data, because it's the use case. It's very easy to say, but there is no such thing as a generic AI. There is no such thing. And artificial generic intelligence is going to take, I think, Shelley, you and I, likely not on the same island, but we will be retired on a tropical island and having FaceTimes and drinks on distance in 30, 40 years from now.
My apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
When you get some glimpse there. So what we need to realize is that artificial narrow intelligence, offloading one task in one domain and even in one subdomain, is already hard. It's already really hard. Training an AI for oncology, no, you start actually training it for a type of cancer. And then you can say, can I reuse that trained AI for another type of cancer and another type of cancer? Cardiology is the same. It seems very easy, but there is no such thing as generic cardiology. Your enzyme pattern, which is based on your ethnic disposition, makes already an incredible impact. It's a difficult discussion at the moment for a medical doctor to justify, because of your skin color and your ethnic background, you will get medicine X or medicine Y, because people are so sensitive. But the reality is, if you are, and I have some Asian descendants, so if you have some bloodlines and therefore enzyme patterns that are Asian, we all know it's harder to break down alcohol. It's harder to break down milk, right? Which gives the flustering effect in our cheeks and those kind of things. Therefore, some medicines that would work with somebody 100% Caucasian, even if I looked the way, wouldn't work as effectively for me as those that actually take that in mind.
Yep.
But you're a medical doctor. You have 15 minutes from the insurance company. 15 minutes to give you the right advice. Now, that comes to 8 from those 20% match that we talked about. Private hospitals with a better training and better focus, 8-9%. We saw an uplift to 14-15% with Memorial Sloan Kettering when I was at IBM, and we worked with IBM Watson just on the clinical trial matching and on the oncology part. And it was only one part, like the other 200 types of cancers were not even in our realm yet. So what I'm trying to say is, you can train the hell out of things. The need to say, I need a second AI component or a third AI component that is trained for another variation of this use case. And this is where we need to be careful. You can say, oh, I trained for all the EMRs in the world, and you go to the next hospital and they have another EMR system, or worse, halfway your rollout, they change the EMR system. And the interpretation of your source data is so important. So when you look at AI, who trained the AI? Whether it's the best oncologist or the best cardiologist or the best medical triage people in this hospital or in the country, or were there some residents that were sitting on the bench after a 60-hour work week that, hey, you do this training stuff. The second is, how do you continuously, and this is for medical doctors even more important, how does the AI came to his answer? So what elements and what data points did you interpret it, did you get as an input to give me this conclusion? So the better AI in healthcare automatically have this transparency built in. That I literally can say, what was your top 5 recommendation? And this is where AI differs from business intelligence. In business intelligence, we mostly got a spreadsheet or a graph that says dashboard 42. I'm like, okay. And then I'm, for instance, in CP companies, I also say, so your sales numbers or retails, your sales numbers, are they with or without returns? And everybody's like, right? Makes it different for your automatic replenishment algorithm, right? So what we saw is that in medical professionals and healthcare, right, both from an insurance point of view, risk coverage, as from a medical professional triage point of view, you continuously want to know, how did you come to the answer? Which data points did you take? And maybe the best what you advise as a medical professional, I know things you don't know. For instance, bed notes. Remember, Shelley, you get these forms. Do you smoke? No. Do you drink? No. And then you walk with a nurse, you say, well, only a cigar in the weekend and only a glass of red wine at dinner. That's not really drinking, right? And the nurse, he or she writes that on your bed notes, but it doesn't enter your digitized file. That medical doctor, the first he or she does when they stand at your bed, they grab the bed notes and they look at them. So we need to realize that AI doesn't get a perfect universe in data in healthcare. We're lacking or missing something, and it will be offloading some task of human being and therefore becoming a smart sidekick. And as long as we understand AI is a smart sidekick on the shoulder of a medical professional, so she or he can actually do a better job and use their mental energy to focus on that interaction with the patient, then we're good. The moment we think we have the golden nuggets.
Okay, I've got a comment here which has just come to mind. But before that, I must say that there are more than 50 people watching the show, guys. If you've got a question, comment section, and I will call that out. The second thing is, last fortnight ago, when we did the show, we had more than 100 likes. So we actually beat that number. So I'm looking at beating that number today again. So let's look at the target of hitting 100 likes. So if you are liking what you're seeing and if you're interested in watching more of this, please press the like button, the heart button, whatever you're watching, wherever you're watching, whether it is LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, please press the like button and share button. Anyways, now my question to you, Mark, or my comment to you here is, well, this is complicated thing. Let's think about a very standard straightforward stuff. I go to a doctor or a hospital, they give me a form to fill up stuff. Well, they should know about it. Well, isn't that an opportunity for healthcare system to have all the data in the cloud? And when I walk into the hospital, they know who I am, what is my background, what I've been treated for in the past, and also what is my ethnicity, what is what was my mother treated for, my parents gone through. So, for example, if my mother had diabetes, then is that complication also coming into play? All these things, these are straightforward. That data should be available.
Yes, yes and no. And that's the problem, right? So we also have to deal with regulation, right? Regulation about medical data, HIPAA in the United States, is incredibly complicated. And then within one state, can you imagine that you live in the boundary, you live in Greenwich, Connecticut. So you go to a hospital in Connecticut, you go to a medical doctor in New York, because for you, this is all a 10-minute drive, right? But there are 2 states and they deal with their exchange of data. So the most complicated things is, so one of the startups I referred to in the last episode, VitusVet in the US, does this with animal medical records. And the advantage is it taught us a lot about how do you pull an EMR, how do you pull a patient records out of multiple sources and integrate them in one cloud. You couldn't do that today for patients because most of the regulatory is still based on paper forms and processes from the 80s. So if you have IT, they have automated that form that was once designed in the 70s or 80s or beginning of the 90s, and they digitized that one form. But the way we think digital, the way how millennials think when they have their phone, hey, I open this with my email and then I pipe it through to my Word or Google Docs on my phone, and then I save it in my Dropbox. All that connection of data streams, that is part of what makes digital digital.
Mm-hmm.
Privacy and the privacy regulations and the medical information compliance per country are at this moment the biggest obstacles that needs to be addressed. And that means a discussion with our lawmakers and our policymakers. Now, when I lived in Scandinavia, we had a discussion about integration of EMRs, right? One of the things is like countries like Denmark already have that healthcare system. There's one identifier. You can go to every hospital and doctor. And once you are identified that you're there and you give your social security number, they have the authorization to go in that system because you come there for an emergency and they can pop up some of your records, some. But still, that's the core record, exactly what you say, was my identity, with my blood type, all those kind of things. But what it doesn't give is still all the treatments in all the hospitals and doctors. It needs a second level. So around 8-9 years ago, we had this discussion, privacy versus the value of your life. Yeah. Say you're highly allergic to penicillin or antibiotics. Mm-hmm. You get hit by a car, you're unconscious, you're bleeding, there's really a lot of things going on. The emergency staff is working and you're on the way to the hospital. And now the decision comes, do we give you 2 shots of this that both work as antibiotic on the wounds that you already have and help your heart pressure to have the pressure on your veins and your heartbeat to go down, or not? Now, if I know that you can have this and you're in the 95% that are not allergic for this, it's going to go great. If I make a mistake, you die in the ambulance. So the question is that moment, is living more important than breaking your privacy or not? That was the discussion. What is the data value of a human life? What is the legal value of a human life in terms of privacy and compliance? And the more you live in a country that has tackled that, the easier it is to deal with. I think the US has an incredible challenge to go there. Mostly what we see, it is actually insurance companies like Unified Health Systems that have been driving this efficiency benefit of sharing the data. And it's no surprise that countries, Northwestern Europe as an example, that have such health systems also have this kind of digital support system behind it. So it's a no-brainer for me, it's a no-brainer for you, but that doesn't mean
I'll tell you something. In this COVID scenario at the moment, I think it would have been a great help if someone who's now contracted COVID goes to the hospital, and if you know his background and if he's got bronchitis or diabetes or something, he should be given priority than treating someone who's not got anything and has got only COVID, because we know that COVID if someone has any other disease, it actually accelerates that disease and kills the person. So it would have been a great support in this particular COVID scenario. So my question to everyone is privacy that important that we're killing people? Well, in a way, we are killing people because we could have saved those people who would have who've come to the hospital and found out that they're ahead in the queue than standing in the queue waiting, though they've got bronchitis and they may not survive 2 or 3 days.
Well, and I think that's a good point. So what you've seen, right? SAP has worked with some COVID apps as well, and some COVID screening apps as well. The moment we started doing a series of questionnaires to patients, so you are sitting at home and you're just self-testing yourself on your phone, what's your temperature, what's etc. We noticed that if you had respiratory problems, the first question to ask actually, if you had asthma, COPD, etc. Next question is, what medicines do you use? And the reason that is important is some asthma patients already use steroid-based medicines. At the beginning, we didn't know that steroids, and only some, and I'm not going to give the medical story here, please, I'm not a medical doctor, but we figured out that steroids, especially oral steroids, had a positive impact in protecting your whole bronchial system.
Mhm.
So only the moment that you know that, right, you conclude that, hey, from all the patients that are using this and this medicines, they have less problems than patients that don't use this. Gives you already some correlation, and therefore you need to do a causality test. The hardest, Shelley, is once something happens, we all agree that our individual privacy is not as important as the greater good of the group.
Mhm.
But that's when events already have happened.
Mhm.
Figuring out a framework for privacy and in healthcare and healthcare data is a political complex process where healthcare professionals, insurance companies, and politicians need to sit together. And it will have an impact because it also means suddenly if hospitals start to exchange,
Mhm.
they need to standardize the format of exchange. You like you have in finance, right? You have standards how on XML format you exchange annual reports, so we can all compare them because you get the same parameters in. But we are, I mean, you know what happens in the US when one hospital informs you the other hospital? Somebody faxes your files. Let me listen to that. It's 2020, and somebody faxes your medical files.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know what you know what the quality of a fax print is, especially when you have little things like heartbeat or X-rays, etc. in it. And the risk that one page might not come out of the fax, but that's a pretty scary scenario, right? So we need to figure this out, and it has impact also in hospitals and medical professionals and the systems that they use. It's not just a standard, it's also the standardization of the data behind it. And I think AI can work really, can have an important role because you can use smart technologies, and we're having some today in the show, that can help you in that standardization between two processes, between two systems, as a patch up between. But there's also a risky patch up, because that means still that even if you use an AI, if your original data is crappy or there are mistakes in it, and the AI works on an interpretation, it will pass that through. And there's a risk. But there's a bigger risk in that fax that we just talked about that goes over the telephone line to another hospital and might not pick up all pages. So as long as you know the risk, you can manage it.
Okay, no, that's fine. But you know, these are some very standard things that should have been fixed. Technology is there, you know. And to the audience who's watching, guys, if you've got a medical story that you thought could be easily solved by data or AI, then please mention that in the comment section. We'll take that up, because this is so close to my heart that we've got the technology and we can save lives, but you know, what are we doing about it? And it just doesn't get to me. Okay, but so if you've got a story, a medical story, a healthcare story that you think can be fixed by data or AI, put that in the comment section and we'll take that up. And it's a promise, we'll take that up. Please mention, please have any, if you have any questions, please mark them, and also don't forget to like and press the heart button. Mark, one question for you. Startups, what are the startups doing in this space? And how are they driving the healthcare section? What do you see in the market?
So I see three kinds of startups.
Okay.
If I would class it. First is those that really have a great technical solution for a medical problem, a medical process problem. The it's hit or miss. Like they can really resonate well. There's mostly somebody involved with a medical background, or they have been coached, or they have an advisory board with a medical background, and they focus on doing one thing really well, like the or the surgeons, and we're focusing on that one task, that 3D picture, the MRI and the X-rays. How can we rapidly aid this doctor in seeing the difference between this visit, last visit, the visit before? Bang. One task, one problem. But very technical. Where they run against is the integration with existing hospital systems and scaling up after the first or second hospital, because they mostly make the mistake to tailor that solution to their first 2 hospitals.
Yep.
And then they have to go to the third, and their training of their AI doesn't. Then we see the second part. Those are the idealists. And that works great if you have idealistic funding. If you have VCs or investors or government backers that actually say, no, we want you to knack this problem. We want you to break this problem. And then the research component and the discovery of it is more important than the monetary stream, because how do you put a value in the human life? Sadly, there are not that many of them, because it's an incredible complex process to get funding like that and to have someone believe in it, unless you suddenly come in the realms of the Bill Gates, etc., that say vaccine development already before COVID, here's the money. Then there's the third. Those are I would call the pragmatic startups. They say, hey, let's follow the money. Where's the money? And then you see all these claims, financial claims, fraudulent claims, right? Claim processing. That's where the money is. Healthcare insurance. Let's do all this. So, and that indeed solves efficiency in the back of process, and that might make the insurance cost lower or the insurance company's profit bigger. But it doesn't solve the healthcare part. So my biggest concern is, well, we all think it's a no-brainer. How much does a nurse earn? How much does a teacher earn? How much does a stock trader earn, right? And the impact of human life of a nurse, especially the last 8 months, is a little bit bigger than a stock trader, except for that stock trader's personal life. And so the concern is we need to walk the talk. And how much, as I hate to say it, this is only going to work if you have a private-public collaboration, if government representatives, people that sit in parliament responsible for healthcare, say, okay, it's enough. It's really enough. And I think, I hope that the said COVID case is really an eye-opener to say we really need to boost up, because we cannot, with technology, scale up healthcare as such. We can only offload the existing healthcare workers from some tasks that exhaust the living out of them. And that's already quite something, because you don't get a nurse with it's not like, oh my God, our production, we're making 20% more cars. Let's get some people in, give them a 2-month training, put them behind the robot. It's not like that, right? It takes years and years and years and years to be a medical professional. I mean, a seasoned nurse or nurse practitioner is more valuable than a drill sergeant in the military, which is basically the only person who really knows how to command the troops, because all young officers don't yet. I can say this from experience. And so those 3 cases, right? Technical savvy solution, figure out how to scale it. I'm not saying pure idealistic, but indeed looking really for the right reason to healthcare to fix it and solve it. Not enough. And it is a hard and slow target to do. Just think about how hard FDA approval of a drug is, right? Now you need an AI approval of a treatment. We don't even have ethical frameworks, right? IEEE is working on ethical frameworks for AI apps. Like, how do we say this is an ethical app? It's trained, it's transparent, etc. And the third is the pragmatic one to say, claims, workflow, and there's nothing wrong with it. These are cases up for grabs, right? But we need to address all 3 of those kind of startups if we want to fix healthcare.
Okay. So we will get into startups a bit more in the coming section. But I've got a question for you. Excuse me. Mark, we know that IBM Watson ingested all the medical journals since early 1900s. Was it helpful?
Yes and no. No, but it was really important. So was it helpful? Yes, it gave a wider body of triage and exceptions that were documented.
Mhm.
If we had that famous case where Watson was used, and it spotted a kid that had Kawasaki's disease, pink eye. But pink eye is not the same as Kawasaki disease, but they have some similar symptoms. And this kid had a lot of symptoms, and normally it takes weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and then when everything is eliminated, you say, okay, I'm going to go for Kawasaki disease. Well, the discovery model in Watson said most likely is Kawasaki disease, second is, third is, fifth is pink eye. So that for those kind of things, it worked great. What is more difficult, we found out, is if your historic data is biased. In the 70s to the mid of the 90s, almost all clinical trials were white men between their 20s and their 50s. So if you aren't fully ethnically white, genetically white, or you were a woman, or you are not in the age group, you got a treatment, basically, recommendation of treatment out of those trials that didn't fit. We just talked about how ethnicity, in terms of your DNA, in terms of your enzyme patterns and your hormones, etc., has an impact of your. But the same as heart medicines for men are not always the same heart medicine for women. That doesn't mean that there are drugs that generically do the same thing on our plumbing system. And there are drugs that work just a little bit better when you're a woman than that you're a man, or vice versa. There are physical difference between men and women in our system, and they have an impact in hormonal balance and those kind of things. So that question we learned really to ask, how did you come to your recommendation? And then the option to say, now if I take this out, now if I prioritize all clinical trial studies from the last 15 years for this problem, what would you tell me? And we learned that you can't give the answer, but you have to give a best of 5 and then drill down. So you take this amount of time away, but you add this amount of time to do an extra triage on the AI's triage. And don't forget, medical journals and trial results is only one part of the component, right? If I did a TED talk at the beginning when we just had won Jeopardy, we started medical. And I used the example of a woman who was born in Japan, moved to the US, different enzyme pattern, different physiology, that was crying for her oncologist. And for 15 minutes, the time the insurance company gives you, she only said, "I rather die than lose my hair. I rather die than lose my hair." If you would follow number one treatment, that would have made her lose her hair. 70% of your survival rate, turns out, if you look at some studies, is your willingness to fight when you go to a really tough treatment. In this woman's case, treatment number 2 was a better match. There's no AI that picks that up. That's the moment you as a surgeon or you as an oncologist need to not be behind your laptop but you need to have that eye contact and that empathic moment and realize, what is this patient going to take? And this is hard. We need to learn as medical professionals now. We're learning that sometimes the technical best treatment isn't the best treatment. It's the optimized treatment. We can do for somebody who has 6 months to live. I'm going to give you 6 months and you're going to live 6 months and I'm going to give you chemo and this and this and this. And you have the last 6 horrible months of your life. Or we're going to have an open conversation and say, you know what? Let's have 3 good months. And then we'll work together on this.
Okay.
20 years ago, there was not a discussion you had. So also medical professionals grow in this. So if you use old data based on old approaches, you need to make sure that you filter it out and prioritize your modern insights.
Okay.
That's probably good.
Okay, and now that's, I understand where you're coming from. Okay, guys, people who are watching, join the conversation. If you've got a question, put that in the comment section. Like, share this video so more and more people can learn from it. Lots of interesting information coming from here. And Hopefully people will like it, and we have reached 30% of our target of the number of likes that we can hit today. So please press the like button and the heart button so that we can share this with, or more and more people can watch it. One more thing that comes to mind, these videos, when they go on live, I want to know from our audience whether they're watching this live or they're watching this replay. So in the comment section, if you can just mention whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this replay on a replay, then please let us know so that we know whether you're engaged watching this live, or are you just watching it afterwards when you're having a good time at home. Okay. We talked about startups. One such startup which focuses on healthcare is Praktice Inc. Practice with a K. So it is Praktice. Practice. Practice is solving the problem that almost each one of us face during the 30 plus billion medical consultations that have happened every year, which is lack of clear guidance. With the help of AI that has learned some of the medical knowledge of a doctor and cognitive capability of a hospital administrator, Practice has built a product that sits on top of the hospital landline and digital properties to navigate patients to the right care at the right time. So that's interesting. Well, we were talking about that initially. So something that they're trying to get to there. Their CEO Srinath is an MBA by education from the Indian Institute of Management, but has most of his experience in technology and data science in his 10 year of careers in both startups and large corporations. In his most recent experience, before starting Practice, he was looking after the real-time data insights and supply chain analytics at Flipkart, which is India's largest e-commerce firm, which was acquired by Walmart a couple of years ago. He worked in various projects that involved active speech recognition, NLP, and predictive analytics for companies like United Airlines, United Insurance, Lenovo, Pfizer, etc. So let me not waste any time and bring in Srinath to the show. And guys, please press the like button. Hi Srinath, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Shelly. Hi, Mark.
Good.
How are you doing?
Hey, how are you doing?
Are you
Great.
sitting in Singapore or Bangalore?
I'm in Bangalore right now.
So you shuffle between Singapore and Bangalore.
That's right.
Good stuff.
Very-
So
Welcome.
my first question before I hand over to Mark is, how did you start this whole journey? How did you get onto this journey? In your own words, please explain it to us.
Sure. So it all started with my life partner and a doctor by profession. So she had been practicing in a medical setup for 5 years, and she used to discuss with me the challenges that the patients face on every single day in terms of identifying the right care, heading to the doctor and getting the right care in the first go, right? And she also has seen the challenges in the hospital and the doctor's perspective from very close quarters. So what we understood is, and also one of the very underrated problems is, if we can put the patient in front of the right care in the very first time, then it leads to a very good outcomes and quality of care, right? And can we solve this with data is what we used to discuss, and we figured out with solutions which are very easy to make with the advancements in AI. We were able to solve those for a clinical setup in the easiest and the shortest way. And that's when we figured out, can we scale this problem? Can we scale this solution to hospitals and clinics across the globe? Can we implement it for larger health systems, not just a single clinic where a patient is looking for care with the doctor? And that's when we started this journey of first identifying why would a patient come to a hospital? What are the first things that they will try to communicate? And based on that data, can we triage the problem a bit more? Let's say, I'll take a simple journey, Sherry, and now. So if I'm a patient, the first thing I would do is I would go to a hospital website. If I already know that I want to go to a specific hospital, right? The first thing I would try to do is I would look for a doctor of my, who would probably treat my problem. Because I would not know who's the right specialist for my problem, I would go on to WebMDs, I would Google my problem, saying I have fever, I have stomachache, right? I would go through these symptom checkers, and I would get diagnosed with probably a serious condition, and which also says that you should get this care from a rheumatologist or an orthopedician. And I would start searching for that doctor, right? So that's how people usually search for a medical care or a guidance, right? And that's very flawed because a patient cannot really talk about all the relevant attributes and the problems associated with that medical condition, right? Only a GP or a primary care physician can understand that, and that's where we build this technology, which is like the doctor on the first port of call, which is on the hospital landline or on the hospital digital properties, where the patient would be able to interact in the most natural way, saying, "I'm having fever, I'm having stomachache," right? It asks few more questions on which region of the stomach the patient has problem, and which, let's say, since when the patient is having the problem, how intensive, right? And if the patient is having fever, then how much is the temperature? Is it a mild fever or a severe fever? So based on these things, it asks few more questions to be able to guide the patient to the right specialist. So the difference between, let's say, a full-fledged triaging system and our technology is that we don't really diagnose the patient's condition saying, your medical condition is probably one of these three diseases. So rather, we identify the right specialist and then guide them to the correct care step of the doctor, right? And the most important thing that we do in this process is we collect a ton of data in terms of identifying the past medical history, the medication that the patient is currently taking, as Mark said, the specific medication the patient is currently taking is very important for a doctor to make that decision, right? So we collect this complete case summary and then present it to the doctor so that in that 15 minutes, doctor need not spend the first 10 minutes just probing that basic problem and the relevant attributes. Rather, they would understand, they would be able to go through and have a glance at this whole case summary and spend more time with the patient. So that way we are bringing that the quality of care by letting doctors spend more time with the patient during the consultation.
I'm glad you said that, because there was a kind of a fear within the doctors saying that AI is taking our jobs. So I'm glad you said that it's trying to find the right doctor, not solving the problem for the individual itself, or not treating the individual itself on the phone. There is another joke that goes around with the doctors, is that doctors think that people are now Googling a lot before they reach the doctor and trying to self solve the problem, which is one of the things that you would think about. Mark, what do you think about the piece of tech that Srinath's team is building?
Well, first I want to respond to your Google thing. What scares me more is when I talk to a nurse or a nurse practitioner, and they're Googling as well. Right? And it's side effects of medicine. Let's Google this. So no, I'm fully. First is Sri, kudos, right? What you guys are doing is textbook how you should do it. You have a professional who knows the industry with your partner. You have somebody who has identified one problem, one thing that really annoyed her in her career, in her profession the whole time. Because the misconception that people always think like AI is for new things, but it really is. We want to do the things we've always done. We do it faster, cheaper, with more data, and preferably with a better taking care of the patient, because that's the passion that drove us in healthcare in the first place. So you've isolated a task, you've isolated a problem. Great. You have a medical professional who has that background, that process background, and you had that understanding from day one that you won't take a job away, but you will give someone a sidekick. And I just want to make one statistic clear for everyone on the show. One of the research we found, and shamelessly plugging my last TED Talk, which was more about the future of work, but we talked about healthcare there as well. 51% of job activities can be automated. 51% of job, but less than 5% of jobs are entirely replaceable by machines. Now, the concern shouldn't be, I think, will AI take over my job? But will the efficiency of the system allow me to recognize that taking a little bit more human time with my patient, because I'm offloaded by technology, has a better proactive impact, right? That's the case to be made. And mostly we look at cases only, what's the ROI of the technology? But one of the things, and I think, Sri, from what I hear, you guys are pretty much, you've looked at the bigger picture. So I want to go back to you. Is when you started talking with your first clients, how did you guys pitch this?
Sure. A very good question, Mark. So the first thing that we talked about was the administrative optimization that we did, right? So when we were working with, in fact, the first hospital we worked with was a public hospital system, right? So they're not really revenue driven. They would not really talk about how many more patients would you convert by being on the as the first port of call, right? For them, it's about how much cost can we save. So we talked about you have employed these many people as care coordinators on the call centers, right? In the let's say contact centers who chat with the patients. So those can be automated so that they can handle more human-related care tasks, which need not be about identifying whether a patient is an existing patient of the hospital or not, whether a patient has AXA insurance or, let's say, AI insurance, right? And whether a patient's insurance plan is covered for the specialist, or should they go to a gatekeeper and then get a referral letter. So these are all the processes that which are tightly linked to the medical aspect, because let's say if a patient is coming for a primary care, or let's say where the patient is not already diagnosed, they may need to go to a PCP or a gatekeeper and then come back to the specialist. Whereas if they are coming for a follow-up care of a specific treatment, they can directly head to the specialist. So all these are the permutations and combinations that need to be addressed, and this can be pretty much automated, is what we mentioned to the hospital. And we said we calculated the amount of hours that these care coordinators can save so that they can spend that time more effectively in delivering the care in the hospital setup, right? And that's how we started working with the hospital. And we first collected the data on how these care coordinators interact with first call, what kind of questions do they ask, and what things they look up in their existing scheduling system or electronic medical records or the CRM software. And we try to integrate with those systems to get the same information and do the same decision-making process that these people are trying to do. So that way, as you rightly said, Mark, we were trying to build a sidekick for the existing personnel so that with the same workforce, they can scale up to the growing medical needs of the hospital patients.
So question 3, in this, this is always the holy grail, but in this looking to your source system, right, the system where you pull your data from, you've encountered different technologies, different software, etc., different logic behind the setup. How did you guys deal with that?
Sure. That's right. So, in a typical hospital setup, there are various technologies that are used to guide the patient from the problem to the consultation, right? So the way we dealt with that is to first prioritize which are the fundamental things that a care coordinator cannot skip for a patient, right? So we first automated those. For example, identifying the problem and linking it to the scheduling system to see when a doctor is available, and what is the most optimal time is what is the most important decision that a care coordinator makes. And we try to first integrate the scheduling system to look at the list of doctors available, and of the doctors who are available, who's the right doctor for this patient, right? So we try to first prioritize in terms of what are those core systems that we need to integrate with. Then we started kind of bridging the whole gap in terms of, can we automate rather than 30% of the tasks, can we automate 80% of the tasks? To do that, what are the next steps we need to take care, right? What are the next things we need to integrate? So do we need to integrate with the CRM software to understand how much of the, let's say, past appointments were with this same doctor or with a different doctor, how relevant it is to this consultation, right? And then how can we integrate the other clinical data that we collect into the EHR system, so we kind of prioritize based on the typical workflows that these care coordinators follow.
So thank you for that. That's I like that, the part where you basically say, can we automate it, and in what level? I think it's a big paradigm shift with 10 years ago or 5 years ago that we wanted to automate the whole thing, and we did incredible amount of efforts. 90% of your work was in the last 10% of the chain, and you guys identified like the sidekick effect. What is the best way to offload that? Now let's go to, I like one of the examples, and if I may call you out for that. How do you decide like what is the best patient for the doctor? You need to look to different parameters and angles. So I go online, nobody knows me, I'm a first-time patient, I fill in all the forms, I make some remarks, I do some self-made triage, what I think that I'm having. I've Googled that up front, so I copy and paste some stuff. Bang, comes in comes in the practice part, and there you make that match. Who's my doctor? So what do you look at that moment?
Right. So the very first thing, Mark, that we look at is the medical need, right? So that's where, in fact, the first meat of our formative stage has been spent on. So we built this medical natural language processing machine, which would be able to understand the precise medical need in the most layman, right? So when a patient comes and says, I fell down and I had an orthopedic surgery, and I'm now generating complications. So that's a very, very informative sentence where the patient has communicated about the event that he has already gone through, and the treatment that the patient has gone through, and the current problem. So the current problem is some sort of a complication where the patient is not able to walk for long, or maybe he's having bruising or sharping, right? So we try to do that cause-effect relationship, and then based on the current event, we try to ask a few more questions. So let's say, are you able to climb stairs or not? Where are you having difficulty, right? And how much are you able to move your knee up and down? So we ask these questions to understand the current medical problem very, very clearly, right? That's where the whole journey starts. And then we link it to other operational aspects, which probably, if a hospital administrator is trying to understand, like the insurance factors, referral letter, are probably the other operational factors, like when can the patient come, which location they are currently in. So we look at close to 100 factors to build that clinical pathway into which case that the patient needs to be guided right after this. So it's not one of the factors, but the first thread that starts for this is the medical need. We deeply understand the need, and that's what connects us with the rest of the steps in the hospital care.
Wow, thank you. Just for the viewers, in which you don't have to mention your customer's name if you feel uncomfortable or they feel uncomfortable, but which areas of the world for our viewers are you now active with your solution?
Sure. So we're active. I can name the customers as well because we have contracts with them, and it's all public as well. So we work with 10 of the largest health systems in Asia Pacific. We work with Apollo Hospital, which is India's largest hospital system. And we also work with Sing Health, which is the largest public health system of Singapore. Right? We did a pilot with them, and we are working with some of the largest health systems like Columbia Asia, Medanta, IHH and Fortis. So they are all tertiary and quaternary care facilities with a lot of locations, 30, 40 hospitals, and 100, 120 clinics, right? So it's a diverse mix of large health systems we are not currently working with practices or smaller hospitals yet, though that's the goal for the next years to come. But however, we are working with 10 large health systems in the Asia Pacific region, majorly in India, a few in Singapore, and also in the Middle East.
So, and you're all doing that in English, right? Or also other languages?
Primarily English.
Yes.
In most of the hospitals that we work with, the patients usually speak in English, even when they call the call center. So that's why we chose English language.
No, because that's an important one, right? I mean, it's not clear for everybody that the moment you would go to another language, you literally have to redo your whole training as you did before. And you can't just do a Google Translate training, because this is where exactly what's so important. So how did you deal? We talked about before the complexity of regulation and compliance and privacy. So in the different regions and the different situations you worked in, how did you guys deal with that?
Right. That's one of the toughest challenges that we had to solve, Mark. Absolutely right. The compliance and the regulatory requirements. So it all starts with, following the guidelines that have been put in place, the HIPAA compliance or the respective government guidelines on where the data should be stored and what kind of data is defined as PII, what kind of data is defined as PHI, right? And identifying kind of based on those guidelines, what is the purview of, let's say, being compliant and let's say not being compliant. So we try to understand that by going to respective guidelines of the countries. So when we started working with hospitals in Singapore, we kind of thoroughly understood the compliance regulations there. What data can we safely, let's say, interact with the patient on getting the problem or understanding the problem? What data should be encrypt at the client side and only show it to the patient once we decrypt at the patient side, right? So we try to understand these guidelines very clearly in the very first step. And of course, we made mistakes. We understood what went wrong, and we tried to improve incrementally over a period of time, right? The reason why we were able to solve these challenges in the very first stage itself is because of the large health systems we work with, and that's where it helped us firstly solve those challenges to be able to even have the security clearance from their IT and security teams, and that's when we were able to successfully sail through this regulatory steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Can I just make a comment before? Sorry, can I just make a comment for the audience? Guys, whosoever has posted a question there, please make sure that you stay, because we are going to take the questions in the end. It's not that far away from now, so please watch the episode till the end and you will have your question answered. And what's this going on? I've got more than 50 people watching and only 45 likes. What's going on, guys? If you are watching it, please press the like button so that more and more people can get access to it and then can watch the episode. And also, if you've got a question in your mind, please ask that question to me, Mark, or Sri. I think Sri has built a fantastic tech that's going around. So if you've got a question, please put it in the comment section. Back to Sri. Sri, I've got a question. Mark, and that is the challenges that you faced while building this startup. You're a startup, funds don't come in that easily. How did you work around that? And I know there are security issues, there are privacy issues. You have to be very, very clear with how you secure your data and so forth. So what kind of challenges did you face?
Sure. So one of the challenges that we faced is the complexity of the healthcare system, right? It's not easy. Healthcare is super complex, and especially when we go to the hospitals who have a ton of other problems to solve compared to other industries, right? So they have their own the challenges that they face in the day-to-day operations, which are not there in other industries. It's very difficult to sell technology solutions which would make their full operations better. That's number one. Number two is the first mover problem, right? So when we are the first mover in this industry, in this conversational AI in healthcare, especially in some of these geographies, it's very tough to convince the hospitals to go for new technologies which are not yet proven in the market, right? So we need to educate the market, and educating the market by being a startup which is having limited funds is extremely complex, right? So we've had to kind of have a lot of road shows, talk to a lot of customers, understand their problems, and kind of educate them on why this technology is going to be helpful for them, and not really just an innovation which would probably yield returns 3 years down the line or 4 years down the line. So proving that point was one of the biggest challenges, right? And the other challenge that we saw, which is kind of common for every enterprise B2B startup, is every customer is different, and they would have their special needs in terms of how should we customize a platform or technology to the way they have been operating since the last 30 or 40 years, right? And while customizing for the hospital, we also need to look at how can we scale up to the next customer, to the next 10 customers, right? That was one of the biggest challenges that we had to face. And always, time is an essence. While we have limited funds, we need to use that funds very effectively to build a platform that customizes to each enterprise hospital we work with, while building something that can be easily replicated for the next customer who is getting onboarded, right? So there are a ton of other challenges that we faced as a startup, as a healthcare startup. But these three were one of the, some of the most toughest that we have solved in the last couple of years.
Okay. Mark, you've got any comment or question for him?
I have another question. This is going to your pitch as well, but once you've made the pitch and you start working with your clients, who do you see as your most important sponsor as your customer that you work with?
Right. So that depends on the type of the hospital we work with. When we work with public hospitals, the one who takes care of service excellence or the patient experience is one of the most important sponsors, right? They have a KPI to meet to increase that patient experience and net promoter score, and they are on constant lookout for solutions which would help them do that, right? Whereas when we work with private health systems, of course, they kind of spend a lot of effort and time into getting people and getting patients onto their digital properties. So ensuring we kind of help most patients to book that consultation, to get that visit as autonomously as possible is their KPI, right? So the head of marketing or the head of customer relationships or patient relationships is one of the most important sponsors, because their KPI is to make sure maximum number of patients get served to come to that consultation to meet the right. Did I mention, Mark? Were you looking at what kind of sponsors have been able to do it, let's say, more effectively in the past? Any specific question that I can answer?
Oh, your answer is very insightful. I think going back to some situations in the past that I worked with healthcare and AI, I noticed a big difference between medical institutions that had a chief data officer or chief privacy officer and those that didn't. And it wasn't the fact that that person was there, it was that the mindset of that medical institution had led to having that person there. That somebody says our data is an asset, or we need to figure out a way to deal with this compliance versus the effectiveness of the hospital. And it's in the story how you work with customers. I think the hardest is always to find out who are my hidden sponsors. But more important, if those roles exist or not exist, what does it mean for the maturity of my client? And my next question to you is, I've had several medical institutions. We're not going to mention their name when comparing, but there must have been a maturity level, or are they all what Gartner calls the upper right-hand quadrant first moving companies that you've been working with? Because that's also possible. So how would you see the maturity differences in the cases you've been working on?
Right. So each organization is different. So when it comes to even the, let's say, maturity of the existing IT systems that they have, and also their inclination to adopt new solutions which are making their kind of life easier. So there is there's a stark difference between some of the organizations. That's why the sales cycle is kind of quite varied. It ranges between sometimes 2 to 3 months to somewhere around 12 months, right? So it depends entirely on the organization, and we've been able to kind of get to these challenges by trying to pull in as many stakeholders from that organization as possible, right? So with some of the hospitals we work with, we gave over 15, 20 demos, right? And in each of these demos, we were trying to touch upon the factors that are important to those stakeholders, and it is sometimes a hidden trial where we need to kind of get that spark from some of the stakeholders who would later become champions, right? And it's about getting that foot in the door with that first champion that we believe can help us get the cause pushed across in the organization, and making sure we try to demonstrate the benefit and request them to bring in as many stakeholders as possible. And that's how we were able to kind of demonstrate and illustrate on how it can help them achieve their objectives set by the grand vision of that hospital, and showcase that we have achieved these results in the past organizations we work with, and this has given these kind of results. And of course, we would not share the exact numbers, but we would be able to show an indicative improvement in the past projects or implementations, and show them as case studies saying this has resulted in this much of an improvement in patient experience. This has helped the hospital reduce the number of calls and the number of emails by this much, right? And this was able to autonomously guide these applications. So we were able to demonstrate that case study to the champions and get more and more meetings. That's the only solution that we have.
So but this is also important for the viewers, right? Like a lot of startups come in, great technology, make a great rapport with their client, get their foot in the door, and they'll start running and building the technology. And then suddenly something happens and they're caught by surprise, like they like their technology, or what is this issue? And working that stakeholder map, as you said, how essential that is, right? To not only doing it when you make the deal, but actually, as they always say, the other 98% is the execution. And it's in that execution phase when you make that engagement with that client. This is, everybody with a consulting background understands this is experience management 101. But those that work in technology only, or those that work on sales, mostly underestimate that effort, and therefore your startup or scale a lot of people that need to continuously step out of your technology process. Talk with your client. Are we still on track? What do you think? I understand you're uncomfortable. Let me walk you through the process again. What are we going to do, customer, if we hit snag A or snag B? What is our plan A and plan B in that? To have that transparent discussion is not just once a month on a steering group meeting. And the second, what said is so impossible, to continuously show, I always call it the dashboard of results, right? What are the KPIs, or what are the metrics that you're doing? We have done so many records process. We've seen the quality gone up this. We have had the first pilot. These are some either qualitative or quantitative quotes or numbers. So many hours have now been done. So many more patients have been tackled, with so much more focus on the medical conversation and so much less on data gathering. And those kind of efforts, again, everybody, kudos to Sri and team that they understood that you guys understood that was part of what was needed. But sometimes I see the most beautiful technology coming in, and I like, it is the right solution, it is the right technology, and you just don't make that connection with your client, and you had like one or two successes, and you're a one-hit wonder. And let's just not forget, running a startup is not just about funding and technology, but actually how you manage your client and their expectations. So again,
Yeah.
kudos.
I think I've got a comment here, Mark. Startups usually think that they need to reach out to the CIO or the CTO, and because it's a technology thing, and they need to be working closely with them, and miss the whole business aspect of it. Whereas AI in itself needs to be so much hand-holded with the business, because they're going to use it. For example, in his case, doctors who are going to actually use it. Now, if the doctors are not on board, then no matter what good
Nope.
technology he builds and the IT guys take it, it's going to go nowhere. So I think managing that stakeholder map is very important, and I think that's a good advice for the budding startups as well. That you guys need to not only look at or focus on the CIO, the CTO, but to look at the entire organization holistically and map the stakeholder map.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first thing is, whose problem are you solving? Whose problem are you solving, right? If you're solving an IT problem, then the CIO and the CTO are your customer. Because the second is, who's benefit from solving that problem? Not necessarily the people problem you solved. It could be an executive level. It could be another part of the hospital. The third is, who's paying you to solve that problem?
Yeah.
Right. And then, who do you need to be as your gatekeeper or stakeholder involved? Because otherwise they can veto you out, right? And it depends. If you have a CIO that understands that she or he is running the digital assets for an institution, or somebody who sits, I'm on top of the cost of the technology, total different mindset. If you have a CTO who truly looks forward and is in touch, or as chief data officer is in touch with the business or the medical professionals, or somebody who sits under a CIO office and is focusing on the compliance and the governance and the checking the boxes. So reading the landscape, right, really start with, you mostly have four kind of sponsors, right? The ones who problem you solve, the one who benefits from the problem being solved, the one who is actually going to pay for it, not necessarily getting the benefits, and the one who you can glorify, who can feel left out, your gatekeeper, basically, that you need to get involved. And if we forget those four sales cycles, for the better word, or those four experience management cycles, we mostly are lucky or toast.
Good stuff. Before I get to the next part, guys, if you're watching this live, please mention live in the comment section, and if you're watching replay, then say that, so that we know where is our audience coming from mostly. So that's one thing, and if you're not yet liked it, then please press the like button. Okay, Sri, any question that you've got for us, for Mark, for me? Please go ahead.
Sure. So one of the very important questions is the scaling up, especially in the enterprise business, right? So in fact, I mean, we were part of SAP.evo Berlin program. We got a chance to interact with a lot of top leaders at SAP when we were in Berlin and Waldorf, and they gave a really good framework of how to work with enterprise businesses, because SAP is the world's best B2B enterprise company, right? So that helped us really kind of build this strategy so far. And now the next thing is scaling up from 10 organizations to 100 organizations. Right? It's not easy, and especially when we are in a specific industry which has a handful of large enterprises. We either need to kind of scale up in terms of revenue from each of the customers, or probably scale up to kind of different type of customers. It can be either smaller hospitals, or let's say the other allied industries like health insurers or diagnostic companies or pharma companies, right? So we have either a scaling up horizontally or a scaling up vertically, right? So how do we choose what is the right strategy to scale up, especially in the enterprise business, to move from that 10 to 100 customers?
Wow. What is the right strategy if you can choose between vertical and horizontal to scale up, if you want to grow? So I think the biggest risk is that startups diversify too early. Like, have a great solution, I'm going to go to another industry, another domain, and I therefore come with another solution. So the more you can stay to the core of what you do, right? This is like, is your solution modular? Is your solution layered, right? When you work with enterprise architecture, you need to have several layers because several layers connect different, and you build flexibility there in your enterprise architecture. So that's a technology part. Does your design of your solution allow, what kind of scaling does it allow, or what kind of integration challenges do you have? If you're in 10 customers, that's just the beginning. Those 10 customers are actually your reference. And those are not the scalable work. You did probably a lot of customized efforts, etc. And you want to go to a model that you say, I want for 85%, I want a literally replicable scale. In the future, for 5%, those are brilliant cases. They will have more money. They will pay me for some customized work. And somewhere in the middle is some guided self-service, how they can customize that part for those last 10%. And thinking about that, because your people are your biggest constraint. You can do, for 10 customers, you can have a few people, but if you go to 100, you're going to need more than 10 times the people that serve those 10, because you're going to get overhead, you're going to management structure, you're going to get communication, you're going to go to standardization, and it's not anymore one person that is that knowledge point that everybody goes to, because you're now going to get multiple experts. So the first is, when you scale, you need to look at your own efficiency. If we replicate the solution 20 times, how much work would it do? How much can I, when I have customer 20, customer 30, how much things that I used to do manual in my install, manual in my rollout, how much could I automate in that process? So now we're going to make investments that aren't going to pay off by our customers. Our customers are not going to pay us because we automated part of the install, or we automated part of the customization, right? I mean, one of the best examples I find, language. You did everything perfect. You did it in in American English. And now suddenly you got to get a British English-based customer. And that sounds very easy because, the Latin is Latin and medical terms are the same. Well, they're not. Let's just go to babies. It's called a pacifier in American English. It's called a dummy in British English, right? A dummy, it's called a nappy or a diaper. Is the baby doing a nap? Did it do a nappy? Or did it have problem? Did it have rash with their nappy? So all these little things suddenly means I need to train something. So the moment you make a module that says, hold on, this is my base table, and if you use other terminology, customer, go ahead and type it in. You do the translation, like we used to. That's great, but you have to create that model, which means you still get, between customer 10 and 15 and 20, you get extra work that isn't paying off. Well, for those customers, you're still doing your thing. So scaling is not a linear process. It's a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And that means careful planning ahead. If we have 50 customers, how did we get there? Which things did we automate in our own processes? Which is the moment I can only scale by having partnerships? So if I have consultancy or customization part, when is the moment that I'm better off to have my people as expert and to train my partners, my consulting partners or customization partners, than me investing in all these people? Because, right, you need to keep your eyes on the ball. And the ball is very simple. You have one process, one problem you solve in that workflow. So I would really keep going. My recommendation would be, in a situation like yours, keep scaling on medical institutions, right? Take that line, take that strategy as your core, and then say, are there side effects? So one of the examples I like, and it's animal practice, so we can easily go, is VitusVet, focused very much on connecting vets and pets. So pet owners, animals are the patient, and veterinarians. And they looked at the offloading of the task of the veterinarian, they looked at the offloading of the task of the reception, and they looked at the offloading of the task of the owner of the animal, right? Who benefits, who pays, who benefits, different. The vet pays for the solution, but the consumer owner benefits because you now have all your EMRs and your medical data about your animal there. And then they got a relationship with an insurance company, Nationwide. Nationwide said, hey, the good thing of what you guys have been doing is I know the animal exists, I know the treatment exists, I know the veterinarian exists. So you can help me with my claim processing. And they said, yes, we will get you a certified claim. We're not going to do the claim processing further. All we would do is a claim that can be trusted, so you can bypass in your process when it comes from us. The first 15 step, does the doctor exist, is the animal real, da-da-da-da-da, you don't have to do. So we'll pass some benefits to you, but the buck stops here. Now, your situation is tempting because you have a phenomenal workflow solution. So the question is, where would you, from a hospital point of view, integrate, this is where the horizontal point come in, with their partners in that value chain? And that's a natural point of scaling. But taking another industry and say, I can do exactly this here, what I do there, you're going to need at least 200 successful cases in one industry before you can take the risk to attack another domain or industry. And if not, you're in this horizontal vertical thing. You have multiple clients to satisfy, and you're going to get killed in capacity. That's what I would tell most companies, and also you, Sri. I hope it makes sense for you. And we can talk offline about this, by the way, as well.
Okay, guys. This is your last chance to ask questions to all of us. And if you want, please put them in the comment section, and I'll quickly get into the audience question and answer section. Mark, very, very quickly. First of all, I'll take the comments as well, and I'll take the questions. So let's start. Harrison Hunt on LinkedIn says, "Hey Shailendra, looking forward to the session." That was the beginning of the session. Hi Harrison, how are you? Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the session. Very quickly, there are a few names that have been mentioned. Don't need to mention them, but I will quickly get to the next comment from Anand Kanan, and he says, first of all, hi Anand on Facebook, how are you doing? He says, AI takes the leap in terms of RPA. It's a comment. Mark, do you want to say anything on it?
Yeah, we talked about it in the beginning, and I think it's a really nice summary, right? Where RPA was much more a robotic process automation that based on rules, if this do this, if this do that, if this do that. We now have added, and I think Sri's and solution is there a very good example for what you guys did, is you literally said, put some intelligence in the workflow. So what is an outlier? What is an exception? What if there's no perfect match? What's the best alternative, right? Finding the best doctor is not a linear or binary process. Absolutely. And sometimes the best doctor is just not available for the coming 6 weeks, and having the next best doctor this week is a better deal than waiting for 6 weeks for the best doctor, depending on what you have, right? So yeah, adding intelligence, self-adjustable, self-learning intelligence to process orchestration, I think is where we really see the AI market going.
Sri, you want to add anything onto it?
Yes, Shay. I mean, Mark pretty much covered it. That's right. So adding AI to the robotic process automation is really what's the art of the art, especially in healthcare, because the number of scenarios are not finite here. It's almost infinite, right? Because each patient is different. Each patient's medical condition and their past attributes are quite different. So we can't have a traditional RPA based automation, which would probably ask some basic details and pass the patient on to the next step. It's not really going to serve the purpose. So we need to have much more than the typical workflow automation. That's where an AI which has medical knowledge is very, very essential. However, we use RPA to integrate with certain systems to be able to do some of the tasks that a care coordinator does while they are talking to the patient on the call or in the hospital. so that would be even more efficient, and we can reduce the burden of these care coordinators to free them off with that time, right? So we use a conjunction of AI and RPA. We really can't just use RPA for the medical use case anymore.
Yep, absolutely. It's about making processes intelligent, and that's it all about. So let's get to the next comment. It's from Praveen Shrawat. Hi Praveen, how are you? He says, great show going on. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that you like it. Next comment or question is from Anoop Divakaran. Hi Anoop, how are you? Hello, virtually every medical device manufacturer building AI into their equipment. Yes, that's true. Do you see any conflict of info? As we know, the algorithm is as good as the training data. Thanks. Anoop, very well pointed out. Mark, what do you say?
Yes. I mean, let's get for 10 seconds out of medical and go to weather data, right?
Yeah.
Weather models in the US are already based on different parameters and different approach than in Europe. One is based on location, the other is based on velocity and direction, and which works pretty good, right? If you are working with one model, the moment you start combining multiple models, you get very interesting weather prediction. You look outside, it's like, but it's supposed to be raining and it doesn't, right? So too much of a good thing is actually not always too much of a good thing. So we know the algorithm is as good as the training data. So if you have an MRI, right, which is really trained on recognizing some things and it's getting better, but then you feed the output of the MRI to another algorithm that actually also compares radiology pictures, right, you might actually get 2 or 3 assumptions. So again, this is why that ethical framework, that transparency, what is it? What is the assumption it's based on? Not necessarily the bias, but what assumptions is your training based on? How do you come to an answer? What are the most important training data? Who trained you? That same insight is going to be essential for the medical professional. With every tool you work, like if you have a ruler, you need to know if it's inches or centimeters you're working with, right? When you work with a medical tool, you need to know actually what is the training data based on as well. It's the same at the moment you do a heartbeat and a blood pressure. You need to know if you're working with a man or a woman because that has actually an impact.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's putting more pressure on medical professionals to continuously check out what is the working assumption this technology is working on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, next question is from Srijit Wanjipatu. Hi Srijit, how are you? Do you think the government should rethink of a medical policy separated from privacy policy like GDPR to support the AI in the field? I think he's hit the nail on the head. What do you think, Mark?
Yes. Let me be clear. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So 2 words, yes. What do you think, Sri?
That's right. So I think it's very important. In fact, during the COVID situation, even US government has relaxed some of the HIPAA terms. Right? It's very essential to kind of draft a medical policy which is different from a GDPR because the GDPR kind of rules are industry agnostic. They really can't take the sensitive issues, as we discussed earlier. Should we value life or should we value privacy, right? So we need to draw a very thin line and be able to discern at what point the privacy is more important, at what point the life is more important. So that is possible only if they could draft a really tailored and a specific policy for the medical industry than having a blanket policy which is applicable to other industries.
Okay. Thank you, Srijit, for that question. Answer is yes. So 3 yeses. Vijay Rai on LinkedIn says, great interaction, Vijay. Hi, Vijay. Thank you very much for the comment. Really appreciate it. Then there were a lot of people saying they were watching live. Fantastic on LinkedIn. A lot of people watching on LinkedIn. A lot of people watching on Facebook. Question. Ketaki Bhagwat on Facebook says, how does SAP play a role in the medical field? Who can be experts? This is for you, Mark.
SAP has 2 roles in the medical field. One is exactly in the back office processes that hospitals and medical institutions have. You still need to get all your Band-Aid, you still need to get your face mask, you still need to, right? So your whole supply chain, sourcing, distribution. The second is something more modern that we see, and this is where also workflow comes in. We call it patient-centric logistics. So instead of saying they're all kind of horizontal, vertical processes in a hospital, we say no, there's one horizontal process, like a workflow. I knock on the door, I go to the reception, I go to the doctor, I go to the medical, I get to this room, and all those processes are connected by a handshake and a handover of data, mostly the EMR digital version of the bed notes, etc. And we see as SAP that we are playing in both these parts of the field. We are not in the field of the EMR itself. Those are very dedicated hospital systems. We definitely have some HIPAA and medical certified solutions, but we are not a medical company at core, so we will not play in that medical core process. But what we are, exactly as a 77% of the world's transactions go to SAP. And that also means that a lot of those companies are hospitals. Hence, we help hospitals run hospitals, medical practices run medical practices.
Good stuff. Thank you for the answer. Okay, the next question or a comment is from Aritra Roy. Hi, Aritra. How are you? He says, is there any future for medical transcription in the medical field in the coming years, considering the technological advancements taking place nowadays? What do you think?
Sri, you want to go first?
Sure, certainly. It's happening already. So in the doctor room, there are kind of many advancements in the recent past, both through the devices as well as through the EMR itself. There are transcription softwares that transcribe real time so that doctor can focus more of their time with the patient. So Nuance has kind of enabled this with Dragon Medical years ago, right? And there are startups in this area and which are able to get sense of what doctor is talking about, fill the information in the corresponding fields, even get the ICD codings of those medical conditions, right? One thing that probably would increase the value of these transcribing softwares, I would say, is the context, right? So if that transcribing software has an idea or the context of why the patient has visited this doctor and what were the problems before, then the transcription quality would be way better compared to what it is now, right? And I would probably want to hear from Marc as well in terms of what he sees in the market.
I think you're spot on. We see a shift, right? We already saw that shift when 10, 15 years ago, especially in Anglo-Saxon or English-speaking countries, there was an outsourcing of medical transcription, like people just recorded it and it was shipped to India or it was shipped to other countries, mostly in the Asia-Pacific realm. And then the transcription came back. Then software started to take that over, and exactly as Sri says, the contextual part. So like some systems like Nuance, etc., were much better in recognizing the context than others. The next step that we actually see is that while companies have brought those processes back to shore, like they use software directly, or they also have changed their support function, because sometimes somebody still needs to analyze a series of transcriptions for the contextual. Somebody still actually need to check if the software is doing their job. But most important, when we are talking about a patient, when there's multiple transcripts, somebody should actually connect the dots. And while some tasks has been eliminated in medical transcription, especially the manual conversion, we see that the analysis task and the contextual task has been added and gone up.
Absolutely. And I think that plays an important role with the NLP coming into play and trying to make sense of what is being said or what is being designed in there, and to taking that to the next level. So I think there is a shift from transcribing to understanding what was said and making sense out of it and utilizing it for the purposes.
Right.
So okay.
Right.
Yep.
And what I do see, I just want to add one thing, is that the tagging in the transcripts and using the transcripts as labeling for training NLP is becoming more important. So we see some people that were very experienced in doing this, transcribes and mostly supervise the transcription process, are now becoming the persons that are moving like, let's tag the transcription so we can find things faster back, and we can cluster things, and we can actually use this for the labeling process of training AI. And because we're now going from text analytics and recognizing words, we go to inference, right? And inference. And inference is A is B, B is C, C is D, D is E. So when I'm talking about something, right here I talk about the patient, here about John Johnson. Here I talk about the symptoms that the patient with symptoms X. Here I talk about, and those things are all one string. It's the same person, like that Wi-Fi internet example I gave. But to do that, you need to have some tagging and some labeling that discovery processes in NLP recognize, oh, this is the same, right? I mean, you see this in law enforcement as well. Like, we have a suspect, and somebody call him the nose, other one call him the boss, the third call him Carmine, right? And suspect X, but they're all the same. So how do you go to all these files and make that connection? And the tagging and labeling and transcription is going to be more important to help us to see what are the different words and ways people describe something over multiple processes, so we can be consistent in finding inference there.
Sure. Okay. Next comment is from Dr. Vijay Kumar. He's saying Sri is doing a good job. It's making half of doctor's life easy, and empathy deliver can possible. Okay, Sri, some thumbs up for you. Good job, Sri. Dr. Vijay Kumar says, Mark, this is for you, Mark. Most of medical language is same, which is converted to medical terminology.
So yes and no. This is really important, right? For us as human beings, it is the same. But again, take only British English and American English. Words like diarrhea, celiac, dyspnea, right, maneuver even, are spelled differently. So that means that if I go suddenly and suck up a lot of example or training records, right, I might not even recognize that somebody's talking about maneuver. Probably doing Heimlich is there, but right, I mean, edema, esophagus, all these words are total different spelled into. I mean, they always say about America and Great Britain, like separated by common language, and that's just some of the medical terminology. And we just had this discussion about the multiple ways a procedure can be described. One of the most frustrating things we found, we were working with a hospital and in Germany and a hospital in Austria. And it turns out that the surgeons use different abbreviations. And the abbreviation for the right leg in one country is the abbreviation for the left leg in the other. So, yeah, no, it's not. I understand, Dr. Kumar, where you come from, but it's for humans, we get this. But computers are really dumb. They're idiot savants, and they really need to be trained the right way. That's where the complexity is. Shreya, you must have run into that stuff when you guys were doing your cases.
Absolutely. When we work in Singapore, it's quite different from the rest of the Asia, right? So the language, the kind of way in which people speak is quite different. It's shorter compared to the other parts of the world. So how do we make sense out of that language and understand the specific problem was one of the challenges that we had to solve. And each language has its own nuance. And even in Singapore, there are quite a variety of people who are from various parts of the world who speak differently, right? Solving this language challenge is one of the toughest and very important, especially for a conversational AI in healthcare.
Okay. Next question, next comment from Dr. Vijay Kumar. He says, confusion between personal medical data and medical data has to be addressed differently. And that's true, actually, because medical data, anonymous medical data or medical data in itself could be treated separately as compared to personal medical data. I think he's right. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I have to run quickly. Question from Ava Gupta on LinkedIn. Hi, Ava, how are you? And she says, Sri, have you done some work on proactive diagnosis?
So we don't really diagnose and tell the patients saying this is the probability of you having these medical conditions. However, we kind of give that decision support to doctors, saying based on the data that we have collected, this is the probability that we estimate so far, and we leave it to the doctors as an open-ended question because doctors would have much more information during the consultation that they would kind of collect. And as Mark said, it's also about the optimized diagnosis. It's not about the technical diagnosis that matters. So we give cues to the doctor, but we would never do a proactive diagnosis and tell the patient that you might have this problem. However, the technology that helps identify the right specialist is partly diagnosis of trash too, right? So we are able to understand if a patient is having stomachache, is it a gastroenterologist or a nephrologist or a urologist or a gynecologist, right? So identifying that specialty is very important. So we use these similar algorithms as there of diagnosis, but we don't really diagnose and tell the patients that we have this problem.
Okay. Okay, next comment or question is from Rebecca Buckness. Rebecca was on one of my shows a few weeks ago on the Women in Data Science, and she says, hi Rebecca, how are you doing? Anyways, let's ask the question. For the purpose of sharing insights and better diagnosis, do you share medical data across markets? Of course, being respective of client privacy. And that's, I think, for Sri.
Okay. I mean, no, we don't really do that. The simple answer to it. However, we kind of collect metadata, which is essentially improving the AI algorithm, but we don't really share the insights of one geography or one organization with it's an intellectual property of that organization, right? And of course, even we do not store any patient-centric or client data. It's all at the aggregate level of saying a patient having these symptoms, this age group or this demographics, having these patterns or behaviors would be more inclined to have this triage, right? So we only store that aggregate data, and we store high-level metadata, which is stripped off of that geography or client with the other geography. We would not do that as a healthcare organization which is trying to comply with the individual countries' data privacy laws or the guidances, right? And even the data that we store is specific to that region. All the data centers that we use would be in that country itself. Let's say if we are serving hospitals in India, the entire data is stored in India itself. If we are serving hospitals in Singapore, the data is stored only in Singapore. So that way we try to ensure the data does not cross the boundaries.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that, Mark, or should I move on?
I think it was an excellent answer. Let's move on.
Okay. Next, there is a comment from Vikram Arcot, and he says, I've got solutions for SAP and IBM. Do get in touch with me, and I can help. So, hi, Vikram. Thank you for the comment. And yeah, please reach out to Vikram, and if you need help, and Vikram will be able to help.
There's nothing wrong with any entrepreneur to shameless self-promote himself.
Well, that's true. Okay, Vijay Rai on LinkedIn says, how can one pitch for AI for Industry 4.0, and who are the most important decision makers? Where does AI sit in the digital transformation equation? From Vijay.
Okay, I'm going to take this short, but I'm going to refer. There's an article that that has been on Medium and Forbes and also my LinkedIn page, which is called a quick start guide to AI, and answers some of these questions in more details. In short, 3 parts of the answer. One is AI is not one technology. We talked about it in former episode of this talk show. AI is an orchestration of a set of knowledge embedded technologies. When you use them together, so the output of one little technology is the input for the next part. When you use them together as a cluster, you augment, maybe automate, but mostly augment a complete task for a specialist, an expert, of a knowledge worker. So you use a little bit of machine learning, you use a little bit of intelligent RPA, you use a little bit of maybe conversational bots, or you use a little bit of data intelligence or sensor reading, right? And you actually take a process you really know well, as Sri talked about in the beginning, how his partner tackled this whole workflow approach. And you say, how do I solve that problem? And that's what you do with AI. That's where you start. And having said it, like AI is only one thing. Now, going to Industry 4.0, we need to realize that technology goes slower on the short horizon, but faster than you think when you look back. Like nobody, 16 years ago, right? Nobody was making dates by swiping. We didn't make pictures that were larger than a postal stamp on our phone. We didn't have touchscreens. And it is now 2020, but we still work with digitizing processes from 30 years ago. Yet, one of the predictions we make as SAP, by 2024, 4 years from now, we expect intelligent technologies like AI that they will be used to reinvent, digitize, or eliminate 80% of the task we did 16 years, or at that moment, 20 years ago. And it sounds like a bold statement, but it's actually a progressive curve. The moment we had smart touch technology, we could have all kind of other apps. We got doctors that suddenly walked around with iPads and therefore could zoom in and zoom out on pictures, something that they could normally never do because they didn't have that data when they were standing beside your bed. We went from a normal RPA to AI-powered workflows, as we just been talking about. So back to the question, where does AI sit in that equation? AI is going to be, it's a natural evolution of how you orchestrate the collection and interpretation of data. And data is still the glue in which you take these things together. So in summary, yeah, it's part of it. But in the other part, it's still the human, we talked about, it's still the human work, right? So you can transform whatever you want, but if you don't get people on board, you only have some sexy technology.
Sorry, Mark, I found your slide and I thought I'll just throw it out there.
Yeah, there was a 2018 version. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a new version for this, but this is the one. This is an old one that was on my computer. So,
right. Yeah, this is the moment we launched the definition. That's great. Yeah, and you already see RPA at the bottom part. We added later conversational bots to it, but the definition is great. Thank you for doing that. Wow.
So I just thought I had this copy, so I thought it's an old version, but still people should be able to see that this is what you were talking about. So it is orchestration of these technologies together: machine learning, blockchain, data intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, analytics, RPA, NLP. So all of that together actually says what artificial intelligence is. This also tells me something, Mark. We should actually get together to do a kind of a conversation on artificial intelligence and the fundamentals of it, to put that on. I think that could be a good, nice video we could do.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that question, Vijay. I hope you got the answer and try to get the slide. We're running short of time. Last question is from Abhijit, and he's saying, what is PS system? And I don't know why that question and what that means. Who can answer that? I don't know what that means.
Neither can I.
PlayStation?
Maybe PlayStation. I don't know.
That's my favorite PS system, at least. You know, can't wait for the PS5 to come. Now, I'm really sorry for Abhijit, and it's. I would need more context to understand your question.
Okay, that's fine. So these were the questions that we got, and hopefully people got their answers, and I'm sure they did. So yeah, finally, before we go, I've got a question for all of you guys, and Mark, you as well. Mark, any advice for Sri that you want to give?
Yeah, you really started well with processes you knew well and you identified a problem. Keep that as the philosophy. Keep that as the philosophy, because that's the core where you can scale on at this moment. Build that market, be that first mover that grabs that market, do that as rapidly as you can. Invest in some technology that helps you to make scaling part of your software when you roll it out. So you take your own eat your own dog food. Practice what you preach. Take the repetitive, boring task in getting practice AI to a client out of the process. And so you can focus on a freer tier account, clients that will get this technology with a self-service approach, clients that will get this technology with a self-service approach, and one of your partners, clients that will get this technology with a customized approach, and those will be coached by the experts from practice. You know, that's the way to scale, I think, for someone like you and someone like practice. I think you guys have a phenomenal solution. You hit a sweet spot in the market. Time is your best ally. The speed to get that market before anyone else can enter it.
Good stuff.
Thank you a lot for that. That's super helpful.
Thank you, Mark. Finally, before I go, one phrase that you want to leave for the audience, Mark.
I'm going to defer back on what Sri and team did. If you really want to successful in AI, if you really want to make some good money, take a problem that you know, take a process that you know, and let AI do the heavy lifting. Get that numbing, repetitive, boring task out of it, and just focus on making a smart sidekick, right? You can talk passionate about it because you know the problem, you can identify with the problem, you can relate with your customer because they recognize you're authentic, and you have a solution that really benefits them. And then start thinking when you talk with the client, when you tell that pitch, whose problem am I solving? Who's going to benefit from it? Who's going to pay for it? And who do I need to keep really close to me because that person is the gatekeeper? Okay,
Sri, you want to leave a message for the audience?
Sure. I mean, I would give my thoughts for the fellow startups. Especially this is more relevant for healthcare startups or B2B startups. It's super tough, super complex. One thing that we should do is keep persisting and keep working with your existing customers to identify more pressing problems for them and keep solving it. I mean, persisting is the only mantra. There's no other short way or shortcut to kind of achieving the success in the industry.
Good stuff. So guys, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. We've again hit the 2-hour mark, which I was trying to avoid this today, but we're still there. A lot of knowledge, a lot of questions answered. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sri. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Sherry. Thanks, Mark. Thanks. Pleasure talking to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So guys, that was Mark and Sri from Praktice.ai. I would recommend you going to Praktice, Praktice.ai, and have a look at what Sri and his team is doing. I think they're doing some phenomenal work, and I hope you enjoyed the show. So if you are watching this show live, please mention live in the comment section, and if you're watching it a replay, then please say replay in the comment section so I understand how many people are watching replay as well and how many people are watching live. Thank you for your time, and if you've got any questions, you want to meet anyone on this show, please mention their name in the comment section and I'll take them and I'll reach out to them and have a conversation, bring them in onto the show. Thank you very much, and like and share this video. If you're watching me on LinkedIn, press the follow button. If you're watching it on YouTube, then press the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you can be alerted when a new show is on. And if you're watching on Twitter, you know to press the follow button. Thank you very much. Bye now. See you next week. See you around. Bye.